Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're looking at a scenario that baseball fans absolutely live for. We're going to break down how a single mid-season series has the sheer power to completely alter the trajectory of two historic franchises, the Baltimore Orioles and the Detroit Tigers. We're in the final week before the trade deadline, the tension is just palpable, and this really might be the last stand for both of these clubs.
And that brings us to the ultimate, high-stakes question hanging over both front offices right now. Buy or sell? It's literally the most agonizing crossroads a general manager can face. I mean, do you push all your chips into the middle of the table for a playoff run? Or do you just wave the white flag, sell off your stars, and start building for next year? Both the Orioles and the Tigers are towing that exact line as we speak, and this specific matchup, it might just make the decision for them.
Section 1. The stakes. A season on the line.
Okay, let's dive into this.
Because to truly understand the gravity of this series, we have to look at exactly what's on the line and why every single pitch feels like it carries the weight of the entire season. Looking at the current American League wildcard standings, both of these teams actually entered this series underperforming their preseason expectations. The Orioles came in sitting at 52 and 55, while the Tigers sat at 50 and 57. They're both lingering right on the periphery of the playoff picture, and they are desperately chasing the Cleveland Guardians at the top, who are currently 54 and 53. To put that into perspective, Baltimore is just 2.5 games back, and Detroit is 3.5 back. The reality here is brutal. The team that drops this series is going to be pushed dangerously close to falling out of the race entirely.
And the reason that's so incredibly critical is August 3rd, the official MLB trade deadline. It basically acts as a massive ticking clock that turns this from just another midsummer matchup into an absolute survival test. Front offices are watching this series under a microscope. Win, and you might go out and buy reinforcements. Lose, and suddenly superstars like Baltimore's Adley Rutschman or Detroit's Tarik Skubal become prime trade candidates to be shipped right out of town.
Section 2. Orioles strike first. Game 1 recap. So Baltimore actually drew first blood here by taking Game 1 with an 8-5 victory.
With the stakes as high as they can possibly be, the undisputed star of that opening night was young Orioles' Jackson Holliday. His impact was just immediate and relentless. We're talking 4 total hits, a double, and he just kept finding ways to get on base. When your young talent steps up and performs like this under immense pressure, it sets an incredible, infectious offensive tone for the entire dugout.
And that tone translated into just suffocating pressure over the first 6 innings. The Orioles literally didn't let up. They grabbed a 1-0 lead right out of the gate in the first, tacked on 2 more runs in the second, and then, boom, the power surge finally hit. Kobe Mayo blasted a 2-run homer in the 5th, and Tyler O'Neill added a clutch pinch-hit home run in the 6th. They scored in 5 of the first 6 innings, and crucially, they broke a really frustrating 9-game drought without a multi-homer game. Leody Taveras also got in on the action. Basically, they brought the heavy artillery right when they needed it most.
But you got to give a ton of credit to Detroit. They did not go quietly, mounting some incredibly resilient rallies of their own. Hao-Yu was a total standout, extending his hitting streak to 12 games and driving in 2 runs. Zach McKinstry ripped a triple and scored early on. In the 5th inning, Dylan Dingler and Colt Peeth opened with hits, sparking a rally so intense that it actually chased Orioles starter Kyle Bradish entirely from the game. Unfortunately for Detroit, their own starter, Kader Montero, just had a rare rough outing, giving up 6 runs on 9 hits with just a single strikeout over 4 1/3 innings. And frankly, that ended up being the difference maker.
Section 3. Detroit's frustrating reality. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is
it highlights the confusing, incredibly frustrating reality of the Detroit Tigers season as a whole. Based on the fundamental metrics of runs scored versus runs allowed, Detroit's expected win-loss record should be 56 and 50. But their actual record? It's 50 and 57. That is a massive 6-win underachievement. They're playing far, far below their statistical capability. For a front office that's trying to decide whether to buy or sell at the deadline, staring at that level of underperformance is just agonizing.
So, what's the problem? Well, it's a stark tale of 2 rosters living within one dugout. On one hand, you have elite all-star talent. Probable AL Rookie of the Year Kevin McGonigal is already at 4.9 BWAR, Dylan Dingler is boasting an 869 OPS behind the plate, and Riley Green has an 843 OPS in the outfield. But then, the rest of the lineup just falls off a cliff. The majority of the remaining starting spots are absolute offensive black holes, and most of the bench is even worse. This massive offensive disparity is dragging down a stellar starting rotation that features 4 pitchers, including former #1 overall pick Casey Mize, with ERAs of 3.14 or lower. I mean, you just can't win consistently when half your lineup isn't producing.
Okay, let's take a quick breather from all the heavy stats for a second. Amidst all this intense tension and pressure in Game 1, play suddenly ground to a complete halt in the 7th inning. So why did the game just stop?
Because of a squirrel. Seriously, a 20-minute delay was caused by a rogue squirrel racing all over Comerica Park. It started out in deep center field, eventually bolted right between the pitcher and home plate, and required over a dozen grounds crew members to finally corral it. It was this chaotic, hilarious moment of levity in an otherwise incredibly tense game. For a few minutes, it was definitely the most exciting thing happening at the ballpark. But once the free intruder was caught, it was right back to business.
Section 4, the ultimate pitching climax, Games 2 and 3. Let's move to and see how this builds.
Because the upcoming pitching matchups are set to be the ultimate climax of this entire deadline drama. For Game 2 on Tuesday, July 28th, the data heavily favors the Tigers on paper. You've got the Orioles sending right-handed Dean Kremer to the mound, who currently sits at 1-3 with a 5.06 ERA. He's up against Detroit's Troy Melton, who is an impressive 5-1 with a sparkling 1.95 ERA. In fact, the Tigers are an incredible 8-2 in Melton's starts this year. If Detroit wants to claw back into the series and save their season, this matchup right here is their prime opportunity.
And then we reach Game 3 on Wednesday, the grand finale. The Orioles are lining up left-hander Trevor Rogers, a very solid, playoff-capable starter for a real contender. But Detroit, they're sitting out Tarik Skubal, the reigning 2-time AL Cy Young Award winner, who is having yet another spectacular Cy Young caliber season. Now keep in mind, Baltimore currently leads the overall season series 3-1, but Detroit has home field advantage at Comerica Park for these final games, and they have their absolute ace ready to deal.
Which leaves us with the most provocative question of all to close out our explainer. Will Tarik Skubal stay in Detroit past the August 3rd deadline? No single player on either roster is going to have a larger impact on the trade deadline than him. If Skubal dominates Game 3 and the Tigers win the series, they might just keep him and push for the playoffs. But if he struggles or if Baltimore takes the series, Detroit might pull the plug, become sellers, and move him. Everything for these two franchises comes down to this series and this specific game. It's baseball at its absolute most dramatic. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep your eyes glued to the diamond and enjoy the trade deadline madness.